I've known for, I don't know, many years, over 10 years.
Yeah.
Probably now.
I think so.
And she's been, I think I first met her when she was an interactive artist, making interactive art based on sort of 3D shooters, and you were kind of exploring that space. I don't remember.
Way back.
Way back. Yeah, this was right after Iron Storm, I think. Yeah,
or during.
Or during Iron Storm. Yeah, so she was still Iron Storm. Since then, she's traveled all around the world, curating exhibits, making art, doing installations, performing, also creating video, more traditional video games, but also wildly crazy experimental video games. And I'm so excited because she's going to review some of those projects and kind of put them all together in this talk. And I don't think I've ever seen it all together, so I'm super excited. Most recently, she curated a show in Paris, which I think she'll talk about. And she's also done a lot of work in sort of thinking about intimacy and sex and romance, which at the time in video games was real, like no one was doing that, so that was a huge influence on me. And she was named, she's been recognized for her work. She was named one of the 5 most important women in technology by Fast Company. By Inc. Right. And then Fast Company also in 2011 named you one of the most important women in technology. Yeah. So we're so excited to have her here. Thank you, Heather.
Thanks, everybody. And you're right that I'm maybe going to put it all together. I'll be showing you some of my projects and maybe talk about the inspiration behind them. But if you have questions, definitely we'll have time for that, because sometimes it's only after reviewing your career like 2 or 3 times that you realize these sort of larger themes, which I know are there, but we can draw them out together. So I'm Heather Kelley, and if you wanted to follow any Twitter things like that, these are maybe the 2 things you want to follow. One is my personal company identity, Perfect Plum, and one is my collective, Kogoromi, which I'll also talk about. Just quickly before I start, maybe I could have a water. Is there a water bottle? Oh, sure. I might have my own, but I can find it. Yeah, it's not here. Sorry about that. Okay. As Jane had mentioned, I do have a background in professional AAA game development and in other kinds of like handheld devices, smart toys, things like that, going back to 1997 of all times. And this is maybe a small sampling of some of the projects I worked on that you may recognize or have heard of before, including Splinter Cell and Thief, and also a Star Wars game, a little known Star Wars game for the Sony handheld. And of course, most of these are on really large teams, like 20 to 200 people, but I realized as I was making these that I didn't really get much of a individual creative outlet, so I started doing my own projects in addition to these. And this is maybe a small sampling of what I was doing in the early days simultaneously to my full-time game development work, and it includes small game jams, projections. I think the ones that Jane was mentioning, where I used like 3D shooter engines to make video projections, interactive projections that you'd have at like a nightclub or something, and little conceptual games like 4 minutes and 4 minutes and 33 seconds of uniqueness that I did at a game jam with Petri Piro, and also projects to kind of expand people's perceptions of what game development is, especially because I'm interested in having more women in game development. So having events where I made games with friends in a kind of public context, like at an art exhibition or something like that. But I think the thing that kind of started this current phase of my professional creative career is a project called Lapis, which some people know from the original version, which was a concept for the Nintendo DS. This is a version for a large installation called the Panoscope, and I'll show you this video and maybe tell you a little bit about this game as it's playing. If I can find the button that if I can find my mouse, I will. Nope, that is something else. Oh, here, there we go. actually getting any of the audio, but it's okay. It's just some music. So the idea is that you have a cute bunny, and you'll see it in a second. And the idea is that you will make this bunny happy somehow. You'll tickle its ears, or you'll rub its nose, or you'll scratch its tail, or you might, on the DS, of course, you could whisper to it or sing to it. And if you do, then you will help the bunny fly up through the air through beautiful scenery. Here we have cupcakes and crustaceans and shoes, really great shoes. And if you are able to successfully make the bunny happy in the right way, in the right order, which is going to change from time to time, it's not always the same, you have to use your ingenuity. And if you do, then you will eventually help the bunny get to its happy place. So this is one of the first projects I did that was about sexuality, specifically female sexuality, and it's based on sort of ideas of orgasm and stimulating to reach this goal and making this metaphor. So it was quite, the original version was sort of quite attention-getting. This version is very, I think graphically more interesting and different, and the fact that it's in this bowl installation thing. And that's actually what ended up inspiring the formation of the collective that I was in, Kogoromi, because the people that were involved in this project were Damien DeFeedy and Phil Fish, and that was the core of forming our collective. And as you saw, there were people playing it, they were holding drinks, they were talking to each other, and we really loved that. We loved that having this game in this public place could actually inspire people to communicate with each other. And they didn't necessarily know the game when they walked in, but when they saw it and they played with it, they would learn how to play it and then teach that to other people. And we really liked that feeling of the combination of playing the game in this really large projection and in this environment with lots of dance music and DJs and people just having a good time, and that was going to help the game reach people that might, at that point, 2006, not think a game was an interesting thing to do. And so that was, we realized when we did this event, which was like a one-night-only thing, that we just wanted to make that happen again. And that was the foundation of our collective, Gamma. So, we don't have audio. I just discovered I tried to play a video and it didn't have any audio, just so you know. So yeah, we started Kogoromi, and the main reason we started it is so we could put together this event, Gamma. At the time it stood for Game Art Montreal, but eventually no one really even knew that it started that way. It just became Gamma. And the event, the idea behind the event is to have people do a kind of game challenge around a theme that's relevant to topical things going on in the games industry or in the media world, and then curate the best of those, best and most diverse of those in a nightclub event with music, bands, DJs, where there are no VJ screens. All the screens all around the space are all these different games, usually from 7 to 10 different games. And this is the second year of Gamma. It's Gamma 256, where the idea was that it was in response to, say, HD television, which was supposed to be all the rage. Like, you have to go buy a new television because HD, you must have it. And we were like, well, does that really make the game any better? What can we do to find out? We can force people to use the smallest screen possible, the smallest dimensions possible. And so in this case, you could have no more than 256 pixels in any dimension. And we encouraged and selected for screens that were even smaller than that. So this is the one you see on the screen there. You might recognize, I suppose, if you're in game design studies courses, as a passage by Jason Rohrer, which he submitted to conform to those standards, because, as you know, if you played it, it's 256 wide, but it's only 16 high, I think. And now we know that there's a lot that can be done. You do not have to have a giant HD screen to accomplish something meaningful in games. And I think Passage really drove that home to everyone. So about Gamma, here's kind of the ideas behind our curatorial process. We had some constraints, but we also had some freedoms that we gave people. All the games had to be maximum 5 minutes for playtime, just because we wanted everyone to share and play the game, trade playing the game at the event. And at the time, we required that you use a console controller because we thought that, and I think rightfully so, that a lot of people that might otherwise play games are a bit intimidated by just the keyboards and having like all these macros and crazy commands they have to memorize. And I'd say now in hindsight, that even controllers are sometimes a little bit too much. Like maybe we could have gone even simpler. But that having a console controller as the sole control for the game meant that we could standardize the event. We wouldn't have to like find different technology for every single game that was submitted. The games couldn't rely on any audio output, and the reason for that is because we knew we'd be playing in this very social space with lots of loud music going on. You couldn't actually hear the game, so even if they put audio in, we didn't care, but there couldn't be anything in the game that relied on audio because nobody would hear it. We didn't want people wearing headphones at the party. So, and then it has to be pick up and play, no tutorials, and it has to be playable while drunk, because that was pretty much what was going to happen. And then some of the freedoms were that all the creators that submitted owned their own games. A lot of game contests that are out there ask you to submit something, and they own the content when you do, and we didn't want that to be the case. We wanted to make it really wide open. We don't have a submission fee either, so everybody sent what they wanted to, and if they made something they liked, even if it didn't get into the showcase, they could keep it, they could do whatever they wanted to, and that they could use it as an inspiration for their own career. And we also didn't, we had sponsors for the event, but we never would let a game publisher be a sponsor because we didn't want it to feel like it was just like a feeder activity for some large company to promote what it was doing. So we wanted to be quite, that was sort of our indie cry, is that no publishers would be sponsors of the event. So I'll just go through this one quickly. This was a game from the first Gamma audio feed, and that's the important thing about that is that the gameplay had to be driven somehow by a line in from the audio. So if you turned off the stereo or whatever was driving the audio, then the game wouldn't work. And so we plugged that into the DJ, and we had this really great synesthetic effect because we had the music and the beats going on in the background, and then on every screen, according to what was happening in the music, something different was happening on the screen. So in the case of this game, which was Glee, that we made ourselves, Kokuromi did, all those small creatures you see are the different colors, like the yellow, blue, and red, are determined by the frequency of the music. So if there were high frequencies, it would create one of the little yellow ones. If there were low frequencies, it would create one of the big ones. And you were, it was kind of a collection game where you were collecting and saving, rescuing these little creatures from the, as you can see, the green skull or whatever that's trying to destroy it. Our third Gamma was Gamma 3D. So this is one of the games, in fact, also the game that Kokuromi created for this. The idea behind Gamma 3D is that this was like the next year, and suddenly it wasn't HD anymore, it was all 3D. You have to have a 3D TV, and all games are going to be 3D, and just that kind of cycle that always seems to come around, like since the 50s when it was invented, like it's just going to be the next great thing. And again, we were like, well, that could be cool, but does it really matter? Is there really something in the gameplay that is different when you have the stereoscopic vision, I guess, is how to express it. Because, of course, many games are in 3 dimensions, but you don't view them stereoscopically. But the way we wanted to tackle that is to, again, go with like the most accessible, low-res, fun version of 3D, not the high-end, requires a special TV kind. And the way to do that is with the red cyan glasses, which is called anaglyphic stereoscopy. Never know quite which one. And so all the games that were submitted used this particular vision. The game that we did, we actually enhanced it a little bit even further. You could say we were cheating, but I think it was worth it. I'll show you the game and we can talk about it. If I can get, now again, I have to find my mouse. Oh good, it's auto-playing. Again, there's no audio, but that's all right for now. Yeah, there's no audio. Can we actually get the lights down a little bit to make because a lot of my videos are dark. That's the thing about these events and video games, it's like darkness, lots of darkness. So the thing that's special, you can kind of see it in that view right there when it's showing the table that Johnny Lee developed around that same time, so that when people, and it attached the lights that it requires to the person's 3D glasses. So we had not only stereoscopic vision, but also head tracking, really cheap, hacky head tracking. So the idea is that there's this square and you're like a puzzle, kind of like that Japanese game show 3D Human Tetris. You have to make the shape go through. The idea was that when it started to get quite further into the game, the shape in the foreground would become so large that you couldn't actually see the hole to like turn the cube to go through. And the head tracking actually allowed you to kind of lean around. It's like you would normally on many games use kind of like a shoulder button lean. But in our game, you actually leaned. And so you had this like 3D vision, and it was actually responding to your body. And that gave you an incredibly immersive feeling, if I can use this overused word. But that's superHYPERCUBE. Okay, so no more of the Kokoromi things. I'll just talk about a few other projects that I've done over the years. This one is called Fabuleux. And in this project, which I did at Hexagram, which is a department or a research center at Concordia University in Montreal, where I had moved so I could work on Splinter Cell and all that. We had a sensor device, which is the ball that you see the fellow holding, which has motion detection, like accelerometers, and pressure detection, and also we built a system that it would detect its position within a room and within a 3D space. And once we had that, we started thinking, well, what kind of activities do we want people to do with this, and how can we design a game that will encourage people to experience it in a new way. And I think one thing that interested me was, since we had this object and position detection, how could we get people to move through the space in a different way, just because the game needed them to? And I think you'll see a little bit of that in the video that I have. So the idea was maybe that they would almost dance. And the way we would promote that is that the game is kind of like a three-dimensional connect the dots puzzle. So everywhere in this three-dimensional space of the room are these invisible but audio-cued, which means I wish I had the audio this time, but oh well, audio-cued sort of hotspots in midair. Oh, thank you. Okay, that's a good idea. And then when you'd find that spot, then you'd, I'm going to turn it down because actually she's talking. When you'd find that, you would squeeze it. So the squeezing was sort of like indicating, yes, here I am, I found this spot, which could be like way down here on the ground, or it could be like way over here, almost higher than some people can reach. And it actually did get people to move around in the space, although I'd have to say, the lesson learned is that of course, since it's a game, nobody's like moving gracefully to find the spot. They're just kind of like standing there and then like, where is it? It's like very mechanical sort of dance that they do. And we're also telling kind of a story through this. We wanted to explore how this whole thing could tell a story. And so we have some text that runs. There's some audio poetry kind of over it. And also the objects, that, since it is like a connect the dots, you are actually in the end connecting dots that form a shape or an object, and we made those link back into the story, which was based on Hans Christian Andersen's The Girl Who Trod on a Loaf. It's not one of his best known stories, but it's really interesting and probably like weird psychology going on behind it. So this is one of the most all-encompassing and maybe even ongoing projects I've done, and It started with a residency that I got in Vienna, Austria, and I wanted to, again, do something that was about exposing how game making works to people that may not have seen it before. And I thought, well, I'll learn to program and I'll document how I'm doing that. And I did the documentation by working with programmers to develop some like information visualization applications that I would run while I was sitting in a public space working on the programming. But then I got to Austria, and while I was there, I met some other artists who were also doing their residencies, and got super inspired by the work they were doing, and asked them to join me on the project. And so I also realized I'm a designer by trade, and I know how to do some scripting. And I think I realized about like a month into my 2-month residency that there's no way I was going to learn enough by the end of that residency to be able to complete a finished game in the following month. And what I did was collaborate. So I I collaborated with my longtime colleague Damien DeFeedy, who's also in Kokoremi with me. And then on the graphics, I collaborated with one of the other artists who was actually a fashion designer. So she did the visuals, and she also made some clothing that went with the game, and that's what you see in the small box on the right is an actual dress that she made based on the game, which I think may be a first. The game itself is a game where you play a performing horse, which is a reference to one of the sort of famous things about Vienna. They have these performing Lapis stallions. And you're trying to coordinate your performance with another player. It's a 2-player game. And so the successes, of course, you'll do a fancy leap. And for the failures, you drop a horse apple. So that's what you can see, those 2 dots on the game screen. And I haven't said anything about that strange object on the left. But as you can see, it's kind of a hacked, laser cut and hacked together device of some kind. It's actually generating smells, and that's kind of the first project I did that's leading to the work I'm doing now. So I want to talk about that a little bit later, but this is part of this project. And the idea here was that the smells would generate based on your performance in the game. So if you were doing well, you had a nice grassy scent. It was coming out of a small bottle of fluid. You can't quite see it in the picture, but there's underneath the blue lids, you could say. Those are on a motor, and they would open and close to release different scents. And the fan in the back would then blow the scent away. And if you're doing well, you get a nice grass smell. If you're doing kind of average, you'd have a kind of leather scent. And if you didn't do so well, you were going to smell the horse poop. so yeah, it was a very fun thing to spend the time on when we were there. Okay, I'll get back a little bit to smell later, I hope. And by the way, for time, please tell me when I have maybe like 20 minutes left. Thanks. Okay, so the OhMiBod Remote. So this is a project that I did with a couple of collaborators, and is an iPhone app. And maybe I should just show the video and talk about it. And I'm going to hope that the audio works this time, maybe? Let's see. No, okay, we're just leaving it unplugged. Listen closely, everyone. In case you didn't hear that, it controls a vibrator. turn this down. You get the idea. So, it works with a specific kind of technology that is a vibrator that works on music. And when I realized what like that could do, and saw that the iPod and iPhone had come out, it was like, well, why isn't someone using that to directly control it instead of relying on the different beats of the music? And no one had really done that. And I thought, well, I know people that do amazing audio programming. I can totally imagine what the interface would be like. I can make this and make it in like the style that I would prefer, and not something that's like graphically pornographic, which I don't think would really appeal to as many women. Only it would appeal to a certain segment of the audience, but not everyone. So I could make something that was more kind of poetic. And so I just set out to do it, and in the end contacted the company that made the hardware, and they liked it and had been thinking about doing something on their own, and so they went ahead and just bought that from me. So now it's the official software for this particular brand of vibrator, which is called the OhMiBod. And it's really quite a simple touchscreen interface that controls the speed and the intensity of the vibration. But it's also kind of just like a random art project as well, because it's commercial, but it's not something that I think is going to just take over the world by storm. I made it very intentionally, made it kind of, it's almost like you could look at a Scott Snibby, touchscreen iPhone work and play around with it, and that's actually totally true of this as well. I don't think if you didn't know what it was doing, you wouldn't have any clue. And I like to work like that sometimes, kind of like it has a meaning on one level, but then there's also something else that in another context is also the meaning of it. So this is Jeu le Jeu, the show I did in Paris with Lynn Hughes and Cindy Paremba. We co-curated it. And subtitle, I guess the French name of it is Jeu le Jeu, which means something like, come on, play this game with me, play along. So in English we have the title, Play Along. And Lynn and Cindy and I were invited to curate this show at a place called La Gaieté Lyrique in Paris. And our mandate was to make a show about games and playfulness, but not to be repeating what had happened before in Paris, which at that point there had been 2 shows already that were about games as kind of a cultural force, or games as digital art, but more in the kind of like commercial digital art form of like the characters and the worlds that were created. And we wanted to focus more on play, digital play, as part of the continuum of play, both off-screen and board games and street games, and what it means now, and why are we in this new kind of century of play. And so our response to that was to have a show at the center, which had quite a lot of pre-installed technology, and have a kind of mixture of pre-existing games that you might be able to play at home sometime. Like, we had a preview of Jonathan Blow's The Witness. We had a lot of indie games like Krautscape by Mario van Rittenbach. And we also wanted to have some completely new games created that would work specifically with the material that was there at the venue, so different projection environments. So, and we wanted to make it so that you would just walk through the whole thing and experience all these different spaces, and suddenly, eventually, if you didn't already know, realize that all of these things were in this culture of play, and it wasn't just only games on little screens that fit in that category. So I'll just run briefly through a few of the projects, not all of them, unfortunately, we don't have time. But on the left is Ninja Shadow Warrior by PHOBOS, which is a standalone arcade that requires you to contort your body into a shape of something that's on the screen because you're a ninja, and you have to hide behind like the vase or the bonsai by you and your friends like somehow forming that shape and doing it. The more accurately you were, then the better score you would get. And it would take a picture of you, and we would then broadcast that picture elsewhere in the gallery, and it's so crazy to see like people lifting each other up and like, doing these crazy contortions. And then on the right is Kit Operette, which is by Daily Tout de Jour, and it was a actual opera, interactive opera, that relied on these various props like this umbrella, and it was projecting in 360 all around the room, and to interact with it you had to, at certain points where it would indicate through light, it would tell you to, for instance, twirl this parasol, or there was even a ping pong table, and if you played ping pong it would play parts of the music. So you were actually triggering the vocals in the music by doing these different interactive props. Some of the other pieces I'll go through in the video, but the other pieces, the commissioned pieces, were by Hide and Seek. That's the one, actually, this one. It's called The Building Is. And Baby Castles did an environment called Meowton, which you might recognize when we see the video. Natalie Potzi and Eric Zimmerman did Interference, which is making the rounds in a lot of museums right now. It's like a large-scale board game of sorts. Fred and Company did a piece called The Planets. I forgot to put the full name in my document. I'll remember it by the end of the video. Damien DeFede did a piece, The Elephant in the Room. And I'll talk a little bit more in a bit about a piece that I did with Oscar Barda of Them Games called Trampa entre terre et ciel. So here's a little bit of a preview of what happened. Oh, and I'll give you music. It's just music, but it's fun. Yeah, that's Interference. That's the hopscotch Trampa entre terre et ciel. Ibn Ob, yeah. Unfinished Swan, Bez. That one's called Propinquity. So there's Meowton, an entire town of indie games built for cats, games about cats and for cats. And yeah. Oh, and that's The Building Is, which actually had the building perceiving you and through mini games determining kind of your gaming personality. And then at the end, you'd actually get a certificate after you'd stopped at like 5 different stations that were the senses of the game, like the game's nose and the game's ears. At the end of that, once it had sensed you with all its senses, it would give you a certificate telling you what your role was. Okay, so one of the pieces from the exhibition, Trampa entre terre et ciel. My French is getting really rusty. I've been away for a long time. So there was a very long gallery space, kind of a balcony, and we wanted to develop a game that would not only fit this physical space, but kind of the space of the meaning of it, which was to pull you through from one part of the exhibition to the other, but also to, we wanted to kind of reflect the entire theme of the show, so Play Along really inspired me. And I thought, well, why couldn't we have something like a hopscotch that you have to simultaneously play along with other people? And so that's what you do here. You can only play this with 2 people, and at different points in this hopscotch, which is 19 meters long, you would have different instructions about things you had to do, like hop. Of course, you're hopping on one foot most of the time, but it's like hop, holding your co-player's hand, or you have to cross paths without touching, and we made the paths really difficult to like hop on one foot and get around somebody else while you're not touching them. It's quite a challenge. And then sometimes we even put some instructions about activities you had to do, like encourage the other players who are on the hopscotch behind you, because it would fit like many players at once, or give a compliment to the player that you're playing with. And so the idea was to tease out all these different ways that you can play along, both with another person or with other people that are in the gallery and playing the piece along at the same time. I'll show a little bit of the video of it. More music. last one I'll talk about is the dance singularity. You guys are laughing. Were you there? That'd be awesome. This is the last thing that Kokurumi has been doing. It's like returning to our kind of ongoing obsession with this synesthesia effect, but even more integrating the gameplay for this sort of communal ecstatic experience. Again, I'll just show some video and talk about it. So the idea is that there are the dancers dancing on a modified DDR mat, 9 of them actually in a giant square, so like not a square of 9 DDR mats large. And that gives input to the visualization that's on the screen. But at the same time as that and the visualization is like the filling up of those squares on the screen. But at the same time, we, Kokurumi, are the DJs and the game jockeys, if you could call that GJs. And we're influencing other aspects of the visuals just to kind of make it really diverse, but then also at certain moments we would, when it was coordinated with the music, when you have those like dance songs that have kind of like a big drop in them, and really, you know, the energy rises and falls, we actually timed the interaction on the screen so that when you reach one of those points where the music's going to have this kind of like drop and then like huge explosion, that you would make that kind of like a game where you had to fill up the bars, so that it was a participatory thing where like, okay everybody, dance like crazy, and we'd even put the words like on the screen, dance like crazy, and as they did, then it would fill up all these bars, and if at the end of the break they had danced completely enough, then we would trigger this thing we called the dance singularity, and it would just like make the screen just go crazy with like all these colors and stuff. And so we like kept over the course of like a 2-hour set this like energy level going through not only the music itself, but also like the visuals and the interplay between the dancers and us controlling both the music and the sound. And it was awesome. We're looking for opportunities to do that again. So do I like it? Okay, perfect. I'm so glad I like hit it right on target. I'll talk a little bit about the work I'm doing now, trying to figure out how we can use smell in gameplay. So I've been becoming more and more interested in scent and also in taste, which actually taste is like a huge component of taste is actually scent. It's like one of the very least understood and used and designed senses. I mean, it's not completely unknown, but for instance, it was a pair of scientists won a Nobel Prize for understanding how the olfactory receptors work. And you'd think that would be something we understood pretty well already, but that was only in 2004. So it's like literally less than 10 years that we've really understood how the technology of smell works. And I think my interest and also the kind of relevance of this research is especially strong right now because we also are becoming more cognizant of like biochemistry and the technologies for that. It's becoming quite the cutting edge. And that has also led to a rise in this sort of bio-art and like doing different like genetic experiments for purely artistic purposes and doing, you know, things with the human microbial symbiosis, like, I don't know, making cheese out of the bacteria that grow between your toes, or really weird things like that, but just kind of like art that's about this biochemistry. So I started becoming more interested in how that could be actually designed and whether it's interesting and useful in a game. And there's a lot of challenges with that. So, you know, creatively, we've been so accustomed in games to working in digital and maybe some physical media, but not so much in chemistry. It's really challenging for creation and distribution. It's a difficult set of material to work with. It requires special substances, special laboratories, things like gas chromatographs and mass spectrometers. And of course, there's also some safety issues, just not only with the base material, which could be also hazardous, but also with surely the physiological properties of of scent. On the left here you see some really nice, these are different precise chemical compounds that create the smell that it's mentioning, like pears or caramel. The two on the right, however, are ones you'd probably rather not encounter. They are the molecules called putrescine and cadaverine. And yeah, those are ones that can trigger violent, immediate physical reactions in anyone that is unfortunate enough to get a whiff. Another reason why it's challenging, it's biochemistry, and it's of course partially determined by genetics. So humans have, we can perceive about 350 different molecules, but the problem is that we don't all smell the same ones. So one person might think a smell smells good, and another person will think it smells bad. This is cilantro. It's notorious. I'd like to do a little quiz when I get to this part. Like, how many people think cilantro is horrible and like tastes like soap? Anybody? Yeah. Yeah. There's like it's always a smallish but significant percentage. And then some people, of course, if you're like me, think cilantro is like God's gift to vegetables, and yeah. But it's not the same for everyone. You can't design something that is going to equally mean the same thing or be perceived the same way to everyone. And some people won't even have any sense of smell at all. They have anosmia. So there's just a huge variation. We don't really know. We can't tell what the other person's subjective sense of smell is. It's also cultural. To some people, one smell might be like super delicious and comforting, and to another group of people, it's alien and unfamiliar, or possibly even disgusting. Of course, smell also involves direct physical contact with these molecules. You breathe them in, and they connect to the receptors inside of your nose. And some people have heightened chemical sensitivities. Either it's psychological or physiological. But now you have a lot of public places that are completely fragrance-free for that reason. So I think the way that we can work around this, if we want to use smell in designs or smell in artwork, is that we could attach some kind of warning sign, really. A bit like when you go to an artwork that has lots of strobing lights, or TV shows that have strobing things going on, and you see a warning before that. It's like, if you have sensitivity to seizures, don't go here, turn it off. We have to have something like that to warn people that do have sensitivity to smell to not experience it. Just in terms of its of using the physical nature of smell, it can be contained somewhat inside of a physical space, but it's imperfect. It can escape. It dissipates really gradually. It sometimes stays inside of the materials. You can't control the rate it dissipates that very well, just maybe with air blowing, things like that. Its dispersal is affected by temperature, by humidity, and it travels very slowly, so it's very hard to coordinate the timing of a smell that you smell with something you see on screen or with a sound. And it gets absorbed into things, and it stays for too long. So you really need to design the smell system along with the environment that it's going to inhabit. There's different ways you can do that. They'd all probably have different, experiential qualities, because you could do that in a small space. You could do it in a small device. You could have literally a tube that someone has to sniff from, or on a surface like a scratch and sniff, or even just using real materials that have a smell, like pine chips. We experience smell really much more intensely in proximity to its source. And so when we use smell, we have to realize that anytime someone will smell something, they will feel like they're in proximity to that thing, which is just a design feature that you'll either have to, you'll have to want that, or you'll have to work against it somehow. And it can't really effectively be telecommunicated. There have been attempts over the years, starting 15 years ago, and going to the present day, and now there's even one that's open source that you can 3D print yourself and develop. And in fact, this, if you recognize, or if you don't know, might be, so far, the most successful integration of smell into gameplay. It was the scratch and sniff card that was shipped along with a text adventure game called Leather Goddesses of Phobos. And at certain points in the text adventure, you would have to scratch certain smells. And the most notorious one is you go into a really nasty toilet, bathroom area, and there's something mysterious in the corner, and you're told to sniff it before it will tell you. And then it turns out it's like an old piece of pizza or something like that. It's like a bait and switch kind of thing. Like, go smell a terrible thing in the corner of the toilet. But yeah, that's actually my favorite example so far, and it's like so low tech. But so why would we even bother to do this? Because I think scent has a lot of potential that hasn't been used in design, and especially in interaction design and game design. And just a few of those. Smell triggers memories. We know it does. It's one of the most famous aspects of smell. This is a Madeleine, if you've never heard of that. It's in a famous treat from the story Swann's Way, which was written by Marcel Proust, and many people refer to Proust as kind of like this, the one who understands how important scent is, and the Proustian qualities of scent are often quoted. But in essence, it just means, and in his book, he starts out dipping this Madeleine in the tea, and then suddenly it transports him, and he writes an entire multi-novel series based on the beginnings of just smelling this cookie, basically. So he's very well known for that. We also have a visceral reaction to smell because it protects our life and our health. Not only those kind of bad smells like rotten milk or something, but also smoke and other kinds of things that might endanger our health or our safety. We react very strongly to smell. Smell also triggers instincts. I mean, the most obvious is animals that like rut or go into heat or whatever. But humans also have these different reactions to smell. There's even one smell artist who has isolated what she calls the smell of fear. And it's something that is the byproduct that bacteria create when they break down a certain protein that is secreted when you're under stress. And apparently you can even smell it on other people. She's made perfume out of it. Her name's Sissel Tolis, if you want to look her up. It creates and evokes associations, not necessarily only memories that we've already had, but in-game you could have something at the beginning of an experience that had a smell linked to it, and then find ways later on in the experience to trigger it and repeat it and make you recall that. This is from the movie Ratatouille, if you've seen that. We use smell for identification and recognition. Humans, dogs obviously, and other animals, but humans also do this, just less conspicuously. Like the smell of people recognize the smell of their baby or the smell of their lover or things like that. And then one cross-species example, I can't believe sometimes that people have actually studied this, but they did a laboratory test for people to smell different pet beds and identify which one is the one their pet had slept in. And they were able to do it 89% of the time. So we have some cross-species smell relationships going on. Smell can convey a sense of place or of time. Smell can support a narrative, especially a well-known one. One really interesting thing that hasn't been explored is how it can support a subconscious or an unstated theme, because we perceive it at very low levels. Our senses perceive it, but our brain might not be consciously perceiving it. So you could use smell to introduce more like subconscious psychological states. And then, of course, to create character. You can use smell to identify a character and then reference or recall that character later. And smell is really important for our sense of material. Like, what is the materiality of our surroundings? Are we in a forest or are we in a factory? What kind of substances, wood or metal or oil or dirt or whatever. So it gives a sense of something being real. It supports our sense of reality. And then finally, lastly, again, just returning a tiny bit to the project that I was working on because I'm planning on taking this particular line of research a little further at a residency I'm about to start in about a week in Brighton at Blast Theory in UK. And it's to try to see what we can do with smell as interacting in a sort of physical space or with an object, how it can communicate something to us. Not working specifically with this technology that I did originally or with this set of smells or this game, but using that idea of creating a unique scent and then finding a way through interacting with something, maybe through physical or gestural, like using the Kinect or the Leap or something like that, and then having your activities generate smells and then figuring out, does that help or does it, just make the room smell, or what, how is that going to work? So that's what I'm about to embark on next. And if you want to find out more about what was happening with that project, there again is my website where you can see my work, and also a link to the blog that I write, and my Twitter handle. And if you want to look up anything more specifically about scent, if any of this interested you, there's a few really good resources. A book and a blog by Avery Gilbert, and then a recently released research paper by Simon Niedenthal that is literally the first research I've ever seen that was about specifically smell in playable media, called Skin Games. So I highly recommend going and grabbing that. He really covers a lot of this, the history that I kind of skipped over. So thank you. Yeah. Yes.
So, from the lecture, I see that most of the smell generating devices are kept at a distance, where people smell at a distance. I'm interested or curious as to have you explored devices that are more personal, means that are attached to yourself, and how effective are they versus keeping at a distance?
Right. I've thought about that, and I think my interest is more in things that are at a distance, not because I actually would like to work on things where it's not a screen plus the device, but somehow it's all, the interaction is all maybe a sculpture that you interact with, and that the smell comes from that. So it feels a little more organic, like it's a thing that emanates smell. The kind of thing you're talking about absolutely has been done. I mean, even like in the 20s in the movie theaters, sometimes when they were developing like smell-o-vision, one version used the air vents, but another version actually used like a kind of tube that came up right in your face. And that's possible. I just think seeing the tube kind of reinforces the artificialness of it, or if you're wearing a mask, it's just not comfortable. I mean, maybe if we can put the thing, or what I've heard of maybe someone's working on, and maybe makes it more acceptable.
For example, we
Yeah.
have glasses. And
Exactly. Like if you had like the VR goggles, and Oculus Rift, and if you then had like the tube that's just coming down from that, like you don't see it, and it just makes it more immersive. So yeah, that's totally in the realm of possibility. But for my first thing, I'm more interested in something that has a presence, physical presence.
I like the idea of the nasal rift. The nasal rift.
The nasal rift. Yeah, the oculonasal rift. Yeah. I think you were next.
Yeah, going off the whole virtual reality thing, when do you think that they'd be able to create all the different types of scents for a specific game or something like that? Where you'd be wearing the goggles or something, and then they'd be able to create a bunch of different scents?
That's a hard one to answer, but I'm really amazed at like how much progress has been made quite recently in synthesizing the different chemicals. And I think, of course, there are companies devoted to the industry of scent and flavor, and wouldn't be surprised if that would be somewhat possible. It's just then delivery-wise. I mean, do you just blow it into the air, and how do you make it really feel like it's coming from the thing that it should be coming from? Do you need a robot that's, when you have the goggles on, is always moving around and putting the smell at the right place, or, because we actually have, but and like we have, you know, binocular and binaural, we actually have like bi-nasal sense. It's not as strong as the others, but we actually do tell somewhat of the spatiality of where something is coming from, the smell's coming from, strangely. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit about, with Kukoromi, what the experience is like working as part of a collective as opposed to being like a solo artist?
Yes. Okay, it's different for everyone, and our collective has never been more than 4 people. I guess the one step I should have mentioned in the first part is that we started as 3, but then within less than a year, we added a 4th member, Cindy Paremba, and that's how we've been since like 2007. So I think for us it was that our collective, we think of ourselves something like a band, more than like a large freeform art collective. And so each of us has a pretty specific role to play within the dynamic, but at the same time we found each other because we have a similar vision. It's just that we use our different specialties to achieve those shared visions. And then all of us have other projects we're working on, so we aren't always working in the collective. It's just that sometimes the collective is the entity that provides all the inspiration and like the context to do specific things that we want. And then I think the thing that's odd for us, interesting, useful for us, to know about us is, of course, we all started out in Montreal because we all lived there and that's where we formed. And now none of us lives in the same city, and we live in 3 different countries, and we're in like 4 different time zones. And it's only, I think, we were able to form because we spent some significant time at the beginning in the same place and know each other well. And now we can do things remotely. It's a lot harder though, and things are happening, like we aren't doing as many things now because it's just really complicated to coordinate that. So I'd say living in closer proximity would be a better thing if you can, at least for starting out. And then, yeah, I think it's just that we like each other and we know how to communicate well with each other and collaborate. All of us have worked on other teams. And yeah, I'd say that's what we learned from that. Yes?
Can you maybe go into more detail about sort of how the collective works, like how you sort of coordinate and what kind of projects you make in your exhibits and stuff like that?
That's a really wide-ranging question. I would say that maybe on the practical level, we are doing Google Hangouts quite a lot now. I'll just talk about how it is now because that's, you know, my most relevant recent experience. So we do a lot of Google Hangouts to have our meetings, and we also share a lot of documentation online. Usually, like meeting notes, not like formal long documentation. If we ever create documentation, it's usually because somebody else requires it of us, or it's after we've made it and we want to tell people about it. It's usually not while we're working on it. We're very efficient in our communication when we're in the project. We also, I guess I forget to say this because to me it like goes without saying, but the important thing is that we start iterating quite early. So we have we just program something based on our first idea, and then we all play it and we give feedback and we talk about where we want it to go. So that's crucial to our process. Early on we were using processing. Then we started working more on open frameworks, and I can't remember what dance singularity was written in, but it's always something. And we like share our code on GitHub so we can all download it, and we just have something to look at and talk about all the time. And we use every other design communication method available to us. You know, we send each other photos, or we do research on reference images, or we look at their games and reference those. It's a pretty normal, I'd say, design process for the projects we do. For the things we do that are like a game, we have a pretty standard indie iterative game design process. For the other things, the events, those, I can probably confess that when I started doing those back in like 2006, I had no clue what I was doing. And I just kind of went with a sense of optimism that people would be interested in. And I think it also helped at the time that we were in Canada and in Montreal specifically, because the context there is very supportive of the digital arts. There are spaces that you can have events like the ones we had, and talk people into doing that without a rental fee. You can find different people that want to promote the games industry and want to sponsor the thing you're doing, different schools that like donated time or help in different ways. So it was really a combination of being in the right place and also having, talking your way into things, finding the right circumstance, maybe like a festival that's already existing, and you say, hey, we want to bring this event, if you can give us a space, and if we can get like a couple thousand in sponsorship to get the rental computers, then, or get the computer rental company to cut you a really good deal, or just different things like that. So kind of winging it was how I still kind of do, honestly. It's not really like the end of winging it by any means. Now it's a little easier because we have a reputation built up, and so we can say, look what we did before, look how successful it was, and it's easier, but I think in general the method stays the same. Okay.
Me?
Yes, yes, you. Johannes can ask him.
Can you tell me more about your departure from the AAA companies? Because I've been warned by previous guest speakers that if I were to be employed with like a big company and then try to depart on a solo career from solo projects, there's like contract issues, or you might lose your IP with the company and things like that.
Yeah, that's true. I'd say that during the times I was working full-time at the company, at a company like Ubisoft or something like that, I was generally not making games that would ever be commercialized. I wasn't trying to start my little indie company on the side. I was doing completely weird like projections and events or stuff that just didn't really threaten them very much at all. That isn't like a guarantee though. They could still really not like you speaking out and being your own person when you're also their employee. That's that's another possibility. Well, one thing I did that really helped along that part of my career is, one reason I left Ubisoft because I wanted more time to work on my own projects, and I found another company in town that was a bit smaller and very interested in having me because of my experience, and was able to give me 1 day off per week. So I was really only working a 4-day week, and I was getting paid less as a result. But it allowed me extra actual time. I didn't have to do everything at night in my free time to go and work at the university and do the project you saw with the squishy ball. That was like during that time period. So yeah, that was, you kind of have to be in a market where there's a lot of competition for employees to do something like that. And Montreal is one of those places. There's maybe you can work out something with people because their employees are very valuable and they want to have you. So yeah, it hasn't really happened yet for me. I was very careful not to be working on other commercial projects when I was there. Now, does Johannes want to ask something?
One small remark, because I would be a bad conference organizer if I wouldn't.
If you didn't refute my statement about winging it, okay?
No. Okay. Heather presented a lot of her projects about sensuality and games and sex and technology at a conference organizing called Ars Electronica. It's a conference dedicated to sex and technology and games and stuff like that. The next one will be next weekend in San Francisco. So if you're interested in the dynamics of sex technology and also games and identity at this year's conference, so you're more than welcome. So next week in San Francisco. But because you are one of the people I know, one of the most, you hate gamification. You are one of the big opponents of gamification out there in the gaming world, and especially the context of human patterns of arousal and gamification. So you're really interested in human arousal, but you do not like gamification.
It's like a love-hate relationship.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I want to hear a little bit about
Yeah. I would be remiss in not saying that the OhMiBod app was actually first developed for the festival that Johannes was part of. When it went on tour to Hong Kong, I was invited to present the original work, the Lapis, and decided that I would create a new work. And so the very first version of the OhMiBod app was this gallery-only version of that app. And then I'd say that in answer to the thing about gamification and the arousal thing, what would I say? I feel, well, I think the way I looked at that was actually more like, I was actually saying that gameplay cycles, or this, try, succeed, and then you're done thing, that games are more based on the arousal than that we should make games based on arousal. I think that was it. It was just sort of saying that, and also that's like the narrative arc has that same, rising action, and then the finale and all that. So it's more that those things are based on human biological patterns rather than we should make games out of those patterns. Just that not that it's only one directional, but that was really, I think, more the gist of that essay. Do we have time for more? There seems more hands going up.
Maybe one more question.
No? Not final question kind of question? Is there anybody else then?
Well, let's thank the speaker.
Okay.